And we know that Americans are still stuck behind enemy lines in Afghanistan with no cooperation from the Taliban, according to the Biden's own State Department.
Here with reaction, former Secretary of State for the United States of America and Fox News contributor Mike Pompeo and former New Jersey Governor Christie. They've teamed up for something. We're going to talk about that in a little while. Great to have you both.
Great to be in studio with y'all.
Mr. Secretary, does it shock you to have Ned Price at the Department of State say, you know what, the Taliban is not cooperating. We left town and now they're not cooperating.
It doesn't shock me. It saddens me that we still have Americans that are held behind enemy lines that the Taliban won't release. I mean, this is the classic definition of hostages. Right. We now have Americans that we didn't get out. We got our military out, we got our diplomats out, but we left these Americans, these
they're
U.S. passport
stranded.
holders.
The White House says they're not stranded.
Yes. Though the fact that the Taliban aren't cooperating makes sense. We gave up all of our leverage. They continue to talk about leverage, but I can't imagine what it could possibly be now. The only things left is to potentially bribe them, to pay them. I hope that is not happening or hasn't happened, but we need to get these people home, and the State Department needs to work diligently to get permission for these people to fly to these other countries that I am confident are prepared to take them.
Governor, the top Army general that's there in Afghanistan or was there in Afghanistan, he said he recommended to the president to keep 2,500 troops there. But when you hear that interview with George Stephanopoulos, President Biden and George, the president said, no, all of my advisors agreed with me. That's not what the general is saying.
No, well, listen, he lied a number of times in that interview, and I pointed that out on ABC a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, he said no American's going to be stranded.
That's right. And he said that our American troops will not leave unless all Americans have already left the country. And he pulled out on August 31st without getting all Americans out of the country. So the president lied a number of times in that interview to George. George pushed back on me a little bit, and I said, either he lied or didn't know what he was talking about, but either one is not good for a president of the United States, right? So he can't win either way, and you see poor Jen Psaki, putting herself into a pretzel-like state trying to explain why he didn't get it right. He either got it wrong on purpose, or he's just so out of it that he doesn't know what's going on. Either one's bad for the country.
Well, on that note, Mr. Secretary, generals for years were talking about conditions-based withdrawal. Now, suddenly there's this overwhelming consensus on a deadline. Suddenly there's overwhelming consensus. Do you believe him when he's saying, I wasn't getting any advice at all to keep troops on the ground?
No, there's no way. I know General Scott Miller. I know what he said. I know what the senior military leadership, General McKenzie, the CENTCOM commander, was saying for our entire 4 years. They were saying we have to have conditions. We have to have a plan. We have to have a systemic process that makes the decision about how far we can draw down. Secretary Blinken said there was no plan that they'd hear. No, we had a plan. They just simply tore it up and walked away from it, and you can see the results. I can't imagine that the military didn't give them the same advice that they gave President Trump that said, conditions-based withdrawal, let's go work to create the conditions, and then we can get it right.
But, Governor, this probably wasn't a military decision. This was a political decision. Joe Biden said, it's been saying for years, we need to get out. He's got the keys to the Air Force One, so he said, okay, we're going to get out. It's going to be messy. It was, and now here we are.
What Joe Biden has shown himself to be as president is stubborn. Now, we know from listening to President Obama that for 8 years he said that Vice President Biden then was like a dog on a bone regarding getting out of Afghanistan without any conditions. And so now the dog now has the bone. And what he's done is pulled us out because he wanted to prove that he was right. Well, you know what? I believe Secretary Robert Gates, who said in his own book that over the last 40 years, Joe Biden has been wrong on every major foreign policy decision that he's seen. And guess what? He's wrong again. And this time it cost the lives of 13 American men and women in uniform, and is costing the lives and the livelihoods of lots of people in Afghanistan right now.
Mr. Secretary, what was your reaction when you heard the accusations from Bob Woodward's new book saying that General Milley had called China and basically said, if we're going to attack you, I'll call you first to let you know?
Well, I'm always skeptical about Bob Woodward, so if we'll begin there. But if he did that, if General Milley called and told the Chinese Communist Party, I promise you, I'll give you a holler before we attack, this is something that is deeply inconsistent with his responsibility. He's not even in the chain of command. It would have been a tragic, horrible thing to do. He'll have to account and explain what he said to the Chinese Communist Party.
Does that sound like something he would have done?
You know, I've seen him say a few things these last weeks that I wouldn't have anticipated. Things about critical race theory, his comments about China not being an enemy. We know that that's the case. So I pray that that's not what happened.
Part of the story, the Bob Woodward story, said that the reason Milley reached out, and apparently Defense Secretary Esper was in on this. It was a big deal where they were all talking about doing that. But apparently Milley saw Chinese intel that they were freaking out about us, and they were worried about Trump being an unstable or crazy person or something like that. You're a Secretary of State. You ever see that intel?
I can't say exactly what I saw or didn't say, but this whole narrative that there was this great risk that we were going to go do something crazy is just fundamentally false. It's what the left wants us all to believe, that these last weeks that the president was running around contemplating which country to go use nuclear weapons against. It didn't happen. It's untrue. And so anybody who was calling any adversary, telling them that don't worry, everything is fine, was reacting to something that just simply didn't exist.
Meetings,
I don't think I missed a one.
Yeah, we're getting reporting that neither you nor the National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien knew about intelligence that Milley was talking about. Is that true?
I must say, I certainly didn't feel any compunction to call my Chinese counterparts and tell them that, hey, you need to relax, you need to back off. But just we were determined. You saw what we did to push back against the Chinese Communist Party. We were forceful and serious, and I think the Chinese understood that in a way that was consistent with what we were actually doing. Yeah,
Governor, did General Milley stab Donald Trump in the back?
Look, I agree with Mike in this respect. I've read and been in a number of Bob Woodward's books, and I can tell you that he wrote stuff about me in his last book that he never called me to fact check on.
Was it true?
No, absolutely untrue. And I confronted him in Washington when I saw him about it. And you know what he said to me? He said, the White House didn't give me permission to call you. And I said, oh, you're America's great investigative journalist, and you're looking for permission from the White House to call me? Yeah. I mean, I didn't work for the White House, so why has the White House got to give you permission to call me? I mean, it's baloney. And so I want to give General Milley the benefit of the doubt on this. We need to hear from him because the allegations are serious, but I want to give him the benefit of the doubt on this one because I'm not going to believe Bob Woodward over a well-decorated, good-serving general in our military until we see evidence that really shows something. And a book from Bob Woodward, to me, is not evidence.
You know, Mr. Secretary, you served in the military. Do we have a crisis in generalship right now from advice that we're getting on Afghanistan, how it was conducted, the woke stuff that we're seeing coming out of the military, the white rage comments by Milley, now him feeling like he needs to protect the institution, moving outside the civilian chain of command potentially? Where's our general class right now?
Yeah, Pete, I'm very worried about this. I saw military leaders acting in ways that were deeply inconsistent with their duty, right? They are warriors, they are war fighters, they are planners and strategists, not political actors. And I saw too often in the Trump administration senior leaders, 3- and 4-star generals, many of whose names you wouldn't know, acting in ways that were political. Sometimes trying to protect themselves, but often thinking they just knew more than people who were tasked with conducting America's diplomacy around the world, and the commander-in-chief, the Secretary of State, and even the confirmed Secretary of Defense. Our military leaders need to focus on their mission, not on critical race theory, not on political actions, but on being prepared to execute and fight America's wars when the commander-in-chief calls on them to do that.
Governor, let's talk about immigration, because we have video because of these Fox News drones down in Del Rio showing that bridge, and we've been flying our drones down there, and the last report was 11,000 immigrants they're estimating are down underneath the bridge right now. They're being shipped into different states. I'm sure many are coming to your state, to New Jersey. But we've just been told by the FAA we're not allowed to fly our drones anymore. How convenient, right?
Yeah, well, you know, of course, it becomes unsafe. We think that unsafe from the FAA means, you know, people's safety. They're talking about the political safety of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and that's what they're protecting. And, you know, we got lots of criticism in the Trump years about politicizing different agencies. This is another amazing example of politicizing an agency for what is the president. He invited this. I mean, look, he said all during the campaign that he was going to allow anybody who wanted to come over the border to come over the border, that he was going to reverse the Trump administration policies. And what he didn't understand, obviously, was that the people in Mexico and the Central American countries were listening. So on January 20th, they started coming, and they haven't stopped. And to stop Fox News or any media organization from exposing this stuff for the American people is anti-democratic. and it's wrong. And so, look, I think it's awful what the president is doing from a policy perspective, but it's even worse what he's doing from a political perspective.
It's all about control. They want to control the pictures. They don't want us to show those pictures. But I'll tell you what, until we figure another way to get those pictures, we're going to play those pictures and remind people of what's going on. But Mr. Secretary, this particular White House is all about control. They're trying to control the narrative. They're trying to control the pictures, the optics. Eventually, people are going to say, you know what? We probably should have seen all of that stuff that you didn't want us talking about.
Look, the reality is you can't hide what's happening. These people are coming across the border and going to nearly every state in the United States of America. People can see it in their local communities. You can't turn off reality. People know what they see with their own eyes. And I always just tell folks, believe what you see with your own eyes. When you do, and you see these pictures, the horrors that are taking place in Mexico, these people traversing this country, the women who are being abused, the trafficking that's taking place, all because President Biden made a decision to rip up a very effective Remain in Mexico policy that the Trump administration put in place, is bad for America, and it's bad for the people who are being forced to be subjected to these coyotes in Mexico as well.
And remember, it's not the first time. Those children that were being detained. And they stopped the media, they stopped members from Congress to going and seeing it because they don't want people to see it. You know, it's like the old song, you're going to believe me or your lying eyes. And that's what Joe Biden wants you to do. Believe him, not what you see with your own eyes.
There are also new mandates for citizens in this country and companies, but not, of course, illegals coming across the border. Joe Biden has been slamming some Republican governors who are taking a different approach on COVID. Here's a portion of what he said. We'll get you to respond.
But we're facing a lot of pushback, especially from some of the Republican governors. The governors of Florida and Texas are doing everything they can to undermine the life-saving requirements that I proposed. I proposed a requirement for COVID vaccines, and the governor of that state calls it, quote, a tyrannical type move. A tyrannical type move. This is the worst kind of politics because it's putting the lives of citizens of their states, especially children, at risk. And I refuse to give in to it.
Governor, who really is playing politics here? So they're pushing mandates, demonizing governors who are taking a different approach, who are simply saying, choose to get the vaccine if you'd like. And also, they're more robustly providing monoclonal antibodies and the opportunity for therapeutics that a lot of others in left-wing states are saying are not allowing people to get.
Look, first thing is, real conservatism is about letting the government closest to the people make those decisions. Local government should be making these decisions on how they want to run things in their town. My view as a governor shouldn't be making them, and neither should the president. Certainly the president shouldn't be telling people that there has to be a vaccine mandate in 2/3 of the businesses. We should be persuading people to take the vaccine. I'm vaccinated. I think people should take the vaccine. But you got to persuade them as to why it's in their interest and the interest of their family. You can't be telling them you must do it. What he's going to do is harden opposition to the vaccine. He's going to make the pandemic worse by making this even more political than it was before. And as for the governors, I think the smart ones, the good ones, are saying, we're going to let our school boards make these decisions. We're going to let local governments make these decisions. And we're not going to let the federal government get in between us and our local governments.
Well, and Mr. Secretary, during your administration with Donald Trump, they had Operation Warp Speed, and we got the vaccines in record time, and that's great. And they made a bunch of masks and all that stuff. Thank you very much for that. But at the same time, when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were running for president and vice president, they politicized it. They said, you know, I don't know if I'm going to trust a Donald Trump vaccine. Hence, here we are a year and a half later, there's vaccine hesitancy. We shouldn't be surprised.
And Steve, they've never unpoisoned that well. Right, to this day, they don't even acknowledge that they were wrong to have doubted whether this vaccine could be delivered in a year, which no one believed could happen. And they all said it wouldn't. And second, that this Trump vaccine would somehow be dangerous. Right, this is what our vice president is on record as saying, and she won't go fix that. If you want to know why there's people who are worried about this, it's because the leaders of our country today suggested that somehow these vaccines were dangerous. They need to go fix the record.